Welcome to the Insight Meditation community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
Well, welcome to election evening, a most auspicious night. I think I want to start with my current favorite Pali chant. It's very short. Anicca vata sankara upadewa ya dhammino upajitva nirjanti tetsum upasamo sukho. All conditioned things are impermanent. They arise and pass away. Understanding this deeply brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. Change, a sea of relentless change. Everything's in motion. And sometimes the motion of change is kind of soft, unobtrusive. And we tend to do better with that, for sure. And sometimes there's change that feels frightening. It's abrupt, it's abrasive, it's aggressive. And certainly that's more challenging to deal with. So we sit together tonight on this election night, and I imagine that we collectively feel, what we collectively feel tonight is maybe not that much different than what it might feel like for people in many other countries, and countries that are often referred to as developing countries. In those countries, there's an election, voting happens, usually with lots of angst and ambiguity. There's tension on both sides, with neither side completely trust in the process. Will the votes be counted fairly? Will the loser and their supporters step down gracefully, peacefully? And in our situation, will various state legislatures, backed by the lower courts, claim irregularities and invalidate the voting in their state and turn the process over to the legislatures to choose the electors? And ultimately, will the highest court of the land use their final legal power to sanction such activities should they occur by the states? What then? The High Court has spoken. There is no further legal redress. But that may not end the conversation as it did in 2004. I imagine many people will perceive a coup d'etat has just taken place. And will the majority of the general population accept the rulings of the High Court? What will people do? Anything? Nothing? Demonstrate? Possibly call a general strike and attempt to bring the government and commerce to a halt? Think of the recent Arab Spring actions. What then? How will the government react? How will the supporters of the legal, quote unquote, legal winner react? If the streets are ordered cleared and protesters jailed, will the military comply? And who will the leaders of the country back? I'm talking about the captains of industry, the CEOs of major corporations and the boards of directors, the union leaders, politicians of all levels, government workers, educators, military. Who will they back? These are the concerns that citizens of kind of newish democracies or democracies in serious decline have to deal with. And today does have some of the flavor of that developing nation election angst. Anicca, vata, sankhara. All conditioned things are impermanent. It's the foundation of nature. So we gather here, as friends, and we have a lot of interests in common. The contemplative arts is a main one. And from time to time, I like to remind my students and myself, just how contemplative practice works. And maybe in times like this, a reminder is appropriate. You all know what a vicious cycle is. You think or you say something, or you do something that's off in some way or another, and it creates a challenging situation for you. It creates a mess. Now that challenge, whatever it is, has a tendency to contract your whole organism, and your scope of vision gets narrower and narrower. There's a little more anxiety that limits your overall capacity. And then when you try to rectify what has just happened out of this tight, fearful ball, you're likely to make it worse. And as you get tighter and tighter, your responses become less wise, less skillful, less compassionate. And that's your standard vicious cycle. Everyone has experience with this more than once. On the other hand, your contemplative practice offers you a virtuous cycle. And there are three elements to it: your personal integrity, ethics, if you will, the various heart and mind trainings, and the deepening of your understanding, which is wisdom. And here's how it works. First of all, I got to say that there is really, in my opinion, there's no bona fide spiritual practice without a continual reflection on one's own personal integrity. You may be doing beneficial kind of stress reduction exercises or something else, but it's not a bona fide spiritual practice without ethical reflections. Very simple. I'm talking about reflecting on whether a particular thought you are having, words you are speaking, or actions you are taking are leading to harm or harmony. It's a lifetime of exploration. So as you refine your thoughts and words and actions, you'll notice that as you take on the heart and mind trainings of meditation, you're able to go a little deeper. You get quieter. Stillness and a soft, open heart become more and more the default that you readily fall into. So then, out of paying attention to your personal integrity and exercising your heart and mind training, insights arise spontaneously. It's the wisdom piece. Insights into your very personal world of relationships, career, health, finances, and the larger spiritual insights of just how this creation works. Insights into the nature of nature, into the foundational impermanence of everything, into the nature of suffering, into the selfless nature of all phenomena rolling on and on. And also insight into the important collective issues of the day, like insights into the effects of institutional racism, insights into an economic system that seems to be structurally engineered to benefit the few at the expense and pain of the majority. insights into why the environment is being mostly ignored and decimated. All those varied insights are why this practice is called insight meditation. There you go. So round and round you go as you clean up your personal integrity to a greater degree, and your ability to relax into deeper meditations increases. There's a deepening stillness, it's more peaceful, which produces spontaneously even greater understandings, greater sensitivities, a more profound understanding of this world that you were born into, which then informs how you adjust your life. Your ethics and personal integrity become cleaner and more oriented towards harmony, both to yourself and to others. And that then allows you to rest in meditation more deeply, which then allows more profound insights. Round and round you go. The virtuous cycle. So when you might get a little fuzzy on why you're meditating and taking up all this time, just remember, you're fueling this beautiful virtuous cycle. I think now, today, it may be safe to say that all 8 billion of us are under varying levels of the stress of the pandemic. And many of our number, they suffer terrible economic pressures. And others have to navigate additional aggressions, exploitations, and discrimination around race, class, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, disability. It's an accumulating load. And I think back in my life, and I know you've all experienced periods of time the same, those times in my life where stressors were incrementally piling up. Issues around raising the children, opening and running a business with a growing risk, and more complexity, more responsibility. Add in some serious health and relationship problems. The burden of it all incrementally increasing in an almost clandestine way, with much of it kind of bubbling along below my full awareness. I would tell myself as I pulled on my figurative bootstraps, I got this, it can be handled. But it was only when conditions somehow lifted to some degree, or they eased up, that it would register the amount of stress that I was actually carrying. And then I'd notice the huge difference. It's like, wow, I didn't realize what I was enduring. This is so different now. Kind of snuck up on me. So now I'm older and maybe wiser, not sure on certain days, but I know it's prudent to acknowledge and work with the obvious stressors, even when they're not readily detectable. So under these very pressed circumstances, it might be useful to reflect and consider employing maybe some additional reflections in a couple of areas. One personal and one collective. And so the personal reflection, I mean, what is your appropriate, compassionate personal response to these extra stressors? How can you keep yourself well? Support your heart staying open and your mind being crisp, clear, and ready. It's kind of like, you think of the oxygen mask metaphor when you're on an airplane. The instructions for flying with a child. You get your mask on first, then extend aid where needed. And self-care. The second reflection, which I'll go into a little later, but what's the appropriate collective action to support greater harmony? What is the most compassionate action for the common welfare? toward harmony and away from harm. And this contemplation, not so easy. All right, let's start with the first reflection, the appropriate response in terms of self-care. A regular formal meditation practice, well, that's a slam dunk. All of you people know that. You wouldn't be here. And under the big practice umbrella, you find the compassion practices for yourself and for others, the loving friendliness practices, the equanimity practices, and all the ways to work with challenging emotions. Lots of great stuff. And just the simple remembering to be mindful during the day in an informal sense will give you a healthy breather. Just by bringing the mind back to right here, right now, the feeling of whatever chair you're in or the couch or the lying down, whatever you're doing, or if you when you go outside, the breeze and the light and the shades of, this beautiful crisp fall we're having. Or you taking a shower, and what does the water feel like as it runs down your body, or the taste of food you're eating, just paying simple attention the best you're able, just inhabiting experience. I mean, each moment that is spent simply aware is a moment not worrying or perseverating. It's really like a mini vacation from all the pressures of these times. Those mini vacations can be healing. They can leave you fresher and leave you with more creative juices to meet and navigate whatever is required of you. As a teacher, I like to think, well, what's the situation going on? What might I offer that's kind of direct, on target, that can serve the occasion? And these times I was thinking, well, it might be helpful and beneficial to pepper your daily formal practice and informal practice with some on-the-fly formal practice. I'll explain. It's really quite simple and easy. There's a growing body of scientific evidence that by simply slowing your breathing rate and by breathing through your nose brings all kinds of benefits. James Nestor's book, Breath, looks at the many thousand-year history of breathing practices from around the world. Really, some of these practices predating all your modern religions like Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, etc. He then looks at the new scientific research and all the proven benefits of slowing your breathing down and breathing through your nose. I mean, your parasympathetic nervous system gets a boost, relaxing all the stress hormones. Your immune system gets pumped up. The greater amounts of oxygen that reach and heal your cells. There are lots of benefits. I put a link to it. It's on the website to tonight's talk of a interview with James Nestor with a really kind of interesting doc out of England. So I encourage you, if you have time, take a look at that. So let's try it together. And with this as a backdrop, really any slowing you can do to your normal rate of breathing gives positive results. Tonight, maybe we'll try for like 6 breaths a minute, which is really a count of 5 in and a count of 5 out. And I'll count for a portion of it, and we'll only do it for 3 or 4 minutes. And try to be smooth, not hold your breath at the end or the beginning of a breath. Smooth, slow, rounded breaths, if you could work yourself into that as we do this. And I'll get out my little timer. So find a comfortable position. And to begin with, take a full deep breath and hold it for a moment. And then let it out slowly, completely. One more. And then out slowly and deeply. So you want to completely fill the lungs as we do this. Let your breath become normal now. You want to completely fill the lungs. And let's begin. And I'll count the ins and the outs for just a little while, and then we'll work with it for a couple of minutes. All right, we're beginning with an out breath. Just breathe all the way out. And now in. In, in, in. Out, 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 out. In, 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 in. Out, 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 out. In, 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 in. Out, 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 out. In, 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 in. Out, 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 out. In, 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 in. Out, 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 out. In, 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 in. Now by yourself at your own count, silently. Nice full inhale, full exhale, rounded, cyclical, smooth breaths. Count of 5 in, count of 5 out. Okay, I've been having fun with this, trying to do it more and more during the day. And maybe tonight, if you're dare to watch the returns, or over the next days or weeks when events will be doing whatever they do, just some minutes of breathing through the nose, slowing the breath down. So you all have an oxygen mask. You know how to practice. And just lean into the various components of your practice that call to you, that you feel serves you. Maybe in these times, as if your life depends on it. Now, I think almost everyone recognizes that we, our nation, is in quite a fix. The level of discord hasn't been like this maybe since the Civil War. The Buddha, he saw and taught the importance of contemplating root causes. What are the root causes for all types of harming behavior? And also to learn the root causes of harmony, love, joy. And we've discussed many times here at IMCC the most, what the most elemental root causes for all forms of suffering are. And the Buddha called them the three poisons: the robust energies of greed, of hatred, which includes not only hatred, but an anger, but fear, guilt, shame, revenge energies, etc. And the third being delusion. But tonight I want to move a layer above the most basic and point to some of the results, the effects of the rampant power of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. And I'll segue into these effects of these activated poisons with a link to the precepts. Buddhism offers the precepts as a guide to refining your personal integrity, that groundwork of practice, that keystone part that I mentioned earlier. The precepts are like a study guide. They're not commandments in Buddhism. And for those of you that are new to Buddhism, the layperson's precepts revolve around reflecting on some major issues that you come upon in life, like what is your relation to killing, all the different possible forms, or stealing, or not taking what isn't offered, or your sexual activities, what's harmony, what's harmful, and your speech, big one, and about consuming substances or resources. And again, they involve deeper and deeper reflections on possible harm or harmony that can occur in each of these areas. They involve discernment and then a personal recalibration if you feel you've gotten off track. It's part of the virtuous cycle. And although our deep intention is to reduce harm, we're not clairvoyant, and we can't see the future, and we can't begin to know all the variables involved in the decisions we have to make. And sometimes those decisions turn out to be harmful to ourselves or to others. I mean, we're only humans, for gosh sakes. Nonetheless, as humans, we've got to make decisions, imperfect as they may be, personal decisions, family decisions, community decisions, national decisions, and whole earth decisions. Tonight, I want to reflect a little bit on taking what is not offered, or stealing. And like all the precepts, it's broader and more nuanced when you get into it. Now, stealing somebody's laptop, that's a no-brainer. That's wrong action. But what about the exploitation of others for personal gain? How you define exploitation can be at variance of how others define it. Today, in my estimation, one result or effect of the activities of greed, hatred, and delusion is this continued consolidation of power and resources into the hands of a few. I mean, is it moral for a political and economic system to be constructed to support the continual movement of resources and power into the hands of a small group? Is it sustainable is it desirable? You know, I came across a few considerations on that front, tidbits or effects of the three poisons, if you will. The first one that struck me was that in this national election, we've now spent over $14 billion in the campaigns. Okay. Over 75% of the money has been contributed by the wealthiest 1% of the population. Over 75% of the money has been contributed by the wealthiest 1% of the population. And actually, 33%, a third of the money that has been given by the wealthiest top 100th of a percent. A third, the top 100th of a percent. Does this have an effect on who gets special treatment in the political process or in legislation? How the bread gets buttered. Second, thing that I came across recently, and I put a link to it on the website, and also a Time magazine article kind of fleshing it out, is the RAND Corporation. It's a think tank. It's been around for 70 years or more, and has a really good reputation of being science-grounded and non-biased. And their latest study is powerful. A few highlights from it. From 1947 until 1975, if the gross domestic product, as an example, this is just an example, increased by, say, 1% in a given year, it turns out that pretty much everybody received approximately that 1% increase. If you were a custodian making $5 an hour, you'd make $5.05 an hour. If you ran General Motors back in 1947 and you were making $100,000, you'd make $101,000. All the boats floated up in an almost perfect ratio of 1-to-1. And that was for 30 years. That ratio of 1-to-1 and all the boats moving, it really built the middle class in this country. It built unions, built public education. You know, if the GDP goes up some percentage, your wages approximated that percentage. It was kind of working. But around 1975, things began to change. This is all according to the research and the quantitative analysis of the RAND Corporation. That ratio began to skew to the most wealthy. And today, for example, if the GDP, gross domestic product, rises 1%, we'll say for a year, the wealthiest income goes up almost 4%. Okay? Now, the median income earners' pay rises only 0.17%. It's not on a 1-to-1 ratio anymore. So what that means is the income increases for those in the upper 1%, who live in the upper 1% of wealth, gain at a rate of about 20 times that of the median worker. 20 times. Bigger piece of the pie, whatever the pie is. Now, if the earlier ratio, say that 1-to-1 ratio, with all the boats floating up at the same percentage, prevailed over the last 45 years, the median worker pay, which now is around $52,000, would be $92,000. Think about the repercussions of something like that if that was the case, the reduction in pressure on that family, their capacity. You know. And even if you're in the 90th percentile and you think you're doing pretty good, and you're making $135,000 a year, you'd be making about $170,000 a year. Over these 40 years, as the scales have been tipping, in excess of over $50 trillion has been transferred from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. Okay, I can go on and on, but one last tidbit. In 1975, 36% of the workers belonged to unions. I myself was a member of the International Machinists Union. John Gotti was my union boss in New Jersey, but that's another story. And in college, I put myself, as I put myself through college, one of the jobs I worked was in a steel mill in Florida. And oftentimes we'd work 12-hour shifts. It was hot. A lot of people got injured on the job. It was really challenging. And some union organizers began talking to some of the workers. It was a non-union shop. It was a big steel corporation. And when management got wind of it, they fired all the workers, shut the plant down for a number of months, killed the union, rehired people, didn't rehire any of the original workers. That union never got off the ground. Now today, union membership is around 6%, from 36% to 6%. The effect of that fact on the middle and working class is profound. There's an anecdote that appeared in Sun magazine a couple of years back. Sharon, thank you, Sharon, she sent this to me. A unionized public employee, a member of the Tea Party, and a CEO of a major corporation are sitting at a table. In the middle of the table is a plate with a dozen cookies on it. The CEO reaches across and takes 11 cookies, looks at the Tea Partier and says, "Look out for that union guy. He wants a piece of your cookie." So this second precept has to do with resources and sharing them, and what is exploitation and what isn't, and contemplating how much is enough personally, and contemplating societally how much is enough is really part of the practice. And I got to say, it's curious to me and how much attention is paid when there's a Black Lives Matter movement or some other protest and there's some looting that happens. You know, a Walmart gets looted or someplace and people steal stuff, a TV or a Game Boy or clothes or whatever. It becomes front page news, pictures everywhere, big story, video, gets massive attention. Now, hey, for certain, they've committed criminal acts. They're looters. And they'll face jail time. Juxtapose now their crimes with a system of elite educated, well-moneyed forces aligned to build institutions and maintain them and make laws that result in the endless consolidation of wealth and resources and political power for the few at the expense of the many. Well, I guess that's not looting. It's just business. It's just politics. And you might have noticed that those with immense power seldom, if ever, break a law and go to jail. They make the laws. In 2008, with the mortgage debacle, no one went to jail. Just saying. It's something to contemplate as we look at our collective integrity, our collective ethics. The system that we've created spawns fear, anxiety, and distrust throughout the underclasses. They've got little hope, little resources, and historically, not just in this country, but if you look at world history, they're easy prey for demagogues and extremists of both the right and the left. We are in the midst of an important election process, and we don't know how it's going to play out. And there are really decades of causes that have moved us to this moment in history. It's not just because we got one bad guy, or we think it might be a bad guy, or some people think. It's decades under both major party administrations that reinforce this movement of resources to the few. 45 years of it. The linkage of these policies to institutional racism and other forms of exploitation is strong. It's called intersectionality. People are taking a look at this now. The linkage to the degradation of the environment is equally strong. As practitioners, you're charged to contemplate what is the appropriate action for yourself personally and for the collective. Might this historical moment be a time for mass civil disobedience? Or is compliance with a legal finding the appropriate course? Each of us has to reflect on that and make our best assessment as to what action or inaction will lead to the greater common good and harmony over the long haul. It's not an easy question. And to end the evening, I want to offer a little prose by Maria Popova. My wife turned me onto this piece. It's quite beautiful. It points to the larger perspective that really, whatever conditions have arisen, no matter how challenging they might be, there's always room for gratitude, joy, and love. She titles this piece, Choose Joy. Choose it like a child chooses the shoe to put on the right foot, the crayon to paint the sky. Choose it at first consciously, effortfully, pressing against the weight of a world heavy with reasons for sorrow, restless with need for action. Feel the sorrow, take the action, but keep pressing the weight of joy against it all until it becomes mindless, automated, like gravity pulling the stream down its course, until it becomes an inner law of nature. If Viktor Frankl can exclaim, yes to life, in spite of everything, and what an everything he lived through, then so can any one of us amid the rubble of our plans, so trifling by comparison. Joy is not the function of a life free of friction and frustration, but a function of focus in inner elevation by the fulcrum of choice. So often, it's a matter of attending to what Herman Hesse called, as the world was about to come unworlded by its first global war, the little joys. So often those are the slender threads of which we weave the lifeline that saves us. Delight in the age-salted man on the street corner, waiting for the light to change, his age-salted dog beside him, each inclined toward the other with the angular subtlety of absolute devotion. Delight in the little girl zooming past you on her tricycle, this fierce emissary of the future, rainbow tassels waving from her handlebars and 100 beaded braids spilling from her golden helmet. Delight in the snail, taking an afternoon to traverse the abyssal crack in the sidewalk for the sake of pasturing on a single blade of grass. Delight in the tiny new leaf, so shy and so shamelessly lush, unfurling from the crooked stem of the parched geranium. I think often of this verse from Jane Hirshfield's splendid poem, The Weighing. So few grains of happiness measured against all the dark, and still the scales balance. Yes, except we get to furnish both the grains and the scales. I alone can wade the blue of my sky and you of yours. So thank you for your attention this evening. And you've got a good practice to lean into during these times. And there is a lot of beauty and joy and things to be grateful for. So I encourage you not to overlook any of that. Take care until next time.